It's just natural that you go to the store and you get a treat or you get something new. And so pulling that back, using Rosh Hashanah as an opportunity to say, we have this new year coming, we're going to try this new thing as a family, we're going to buy less, and we're only going to buy what we need.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Maltz Bovy, opinion editor of the Canadian Jewish News. You're listening to The Jewish Angle, the podcast where we look at the issues of the day from guess which angle. My guest today is Erin Beser, an educator in suburban Philadelphia. Her JTA article, called Why My Family is Giving Up Impulse Purchases for Rosh Hashanah This Year, is a moving personal account of grappling with consumerism, a very relatable topic, I'm sure, to many of us. It also has Jewish and female angles that we shall explore in further depth. But Erin Beser, welcome to the Jewish Angle.
Thank you so much for having me.
So my first question for you is just people decide to pare down their shopping for all sorts of reasons. You know, you see like no buy projects, Substacks more recently, where people are only going to buy used, I've seen, or just not going to buy anything, whatever people have written. I'm sure books at this point, like My Year Without Shopping. This has been a whole thing for quite a few years. But what were your reasons and why tie it to the high holidays?
Yeah, for my family, Rosh Hashanah is always a good opportunity to revisit our family's values and our family's practices and to take on kind of like a New Year's resolution. So in previous years, my husband, who's a rabbi, he decided to give up meat coming into the Shemitah year where we sort of give the earth a rest, and he's thinking about, you know, the environmental impact of eating meat. So he just declares in a sermon that he's giving up meat, and the rest of my family kind of followed suit, and we stopped eating meat. And
can I just interrupt you with a question about that? Did you know he was going to say that, or were you like, oh my goodness, I have to make something different for dinner tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was going to stick. He was like, I have this idea. I want to give up meat. I really want to be vegetarian. I really think it's the right thing for the planet, and I'm going to do it in a sermon so that it's public and there's some degree of accountability. And I was like, okay, you know, for the Shemitah year, like for the year, we'll go back to eating meat as a family. And then my kids totally loved the idea too. And whenever I've tried to serve meat, they're like, no, remember, we're vegetarians. And I was like, we weren't. But now we are. It stuck. And so this idea of what does it mean to cheshbon nefesh, right? To take accounting of your soul and to think about who you are and what you want the new year to bring. And I've tried to think about the foundational behaviors that drive the other behaviors that I exhibit, right? So if there's something that I really want to work on around, you know, eating healthy food or, you know, being a sort of calm, patient, less reactive parent or a sort of present spouse, I'm trying to think of like, what are the behaviors that really drive the other behaviors? And those are the things that we've targeted, you know, in our sort of Rosh Hashanah New Year's resolutions. And so the following year, we decided as a family, we were going to reduce our uses of screens, right? Like we don't have casual TV watching or iPads. And, you know, my kids are in elementary school and they know that their friends come home and watch TV and they're like, why can't we watch TV? And I'm like, TV wasn't really working for our family. It wasn't like figuring out when we were going to watch TV or how much TV to watch. It was stressful. It kind of drove and took over everything. And so taking TV or screen time just kind of off the table and out of the conversation gave our family life at home a really deep sense of calm and presence. And so kind of thinking about that project of going into the new year, I started to think about buying new things. And I love buying new things. I love shopping. I love giving my kids new things. I mean, something they don't always prepare you for as a parent when you have your kids is how much you're going to love spoiling them. And you're like thinking in your head, I'm not going to spoil my kids. Like, you know, only bad parents would spoil their kids. And then you just realize how quickly you can kind of fall into this trap of bringing new things into your family's rhythm so unintentionally and so absentmindedly that all of a sudden it's just natural that you go to the store and you get a treat or you get something new. And so pulling that back, using Rosh Hashanah as an opportunity to say, we have this new year coming, we're going to try this new thing as a family, we're going to buy less, and we're only going to buy what we need.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because you're writing both about sort of as a parent and as a woman, because these are, you know, related in various ways. But you write about your plan for the year. I'm going to quote from your article. I'm going to take a hard look at the role Jewish women play in American consumer culture and the impact American consumer culture has had on the identity of Jewish women. End quote. So, what do you see as specifically Jewish or Jewish and female about shopping?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very American, right? And so I think to look
Well,
back at
we have malls in Canada too.
North American,
Yeah, fair
sorry.
enough. It's
Yeah,
okay.
right, the North American project of, the culture, right? Western culture, right? Like this idea that like capitalism is democratic, right? Like this idea that like the free market is going to liberate us all. And it actually traps us, and it particularly traps women, and it particularly traps Jewish women, I think, in that sort of intersection between the role that Jewish women played in an outsized, overrepresented way in American feminism, second wave feminist movement that sort of liberated women from the house to the workplace. So if you sort of look at these great leaders of this great feminist movement, and so many of them were Jewish, you sort of have to go back and ask, as many Jewish historians have asked, why were Jewish women so overrepresented? And I think a lot of that had to do with leadership that Jewish women were empowered to have in synagogues or in community organizations, right? It was natural for women to be in charge of the sisterhood or the sort of like, parallel organizations that existed for women that sort of lived in the Jewish community, but then were coming out into public spaces in the 70s in second wave feminism. And I think a lot of that was that women deserve access to income, right? Equal income. They can work. They can work outside of the home. They can have their own financial buying power, right, to make their own choices. And they don't have to rely on their husband to open a bank account for them. Like these were sort of laws that were passed that sort of liberated women, both in the ability to go out into the world and work, but also the ability to then keep and decide how to spend their discretionary income. I'm over 40. My Instagram wants me to spend money on my face so that it doesn't look wrinkly or old in any way. It doesn't tell the truth about my age. And I'm wondering if that's a value that I should be spending both my hard-earned money on and also my time and attention, which is even the more precious resource in this attention economy.
Since reading your article, I've been thinking about just sort of the what is and isn't Jewish, like specifically, because I'm thinking about my in-laws are Belgian and not Jewish, and they like to go shopping no more or less than anybody else. You know what I mean? Like this, there's plenty of shopping happening in Belgium. I think about the Ladies' Paradise, the Emile Zola novel from 1883 about mid 19th century Parisian women, so excited to the point in some cases of really like getting their families in debt, at the then new phenomenon of the department store. So there's obviously something beyond the Jewish specific. And I like, there's, the thing of like, my culture is the one that likes food.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. So, however, I do think there is something there. So I tried to write down what makes me think is like the more Jewish, and you can tell me if you think this is anything, but sales, bargain basements, sample sales, maybe luxury in some cases, but also used clothes, schmatas. But also I was thinking that there's this kind of like retail is for the Gentiles, like this kind of female equivalent of the kind of self-deprecating nebbish. Maybe this is just like my own very specific New York Jewish upbringing that I think like this, but does any of that resonate?
Totally. I mean, I think if you go back to the origin of our economy, right, like that was dirty work that Jews could do, right? Like the function of the economy needed to be upheld by Jewish money lending that would like make the economy sort of work. And the way that Jews were dispersed throughout Europe meant that you could have this kind of flow of trade that was, your family, like it all was in the family and you could kind of pass it around. And so I think it goes back to like, there's something very Jewish about being sort of deeply integrated into the way the economy functions, which is both stereotypical and something we wouldn't want to advertise like, Jews control the banks. Like, no, Jews don't control the banks, but Jews were forced into banking historically. And it became a profession that Jews had access to when they weren't allowed access to other professions. So I
So you're
think
saying that explains how Jews came to be in the garment industry so much, is what you're saying,
Jews were on
right?
both sides of the
Right,
garment industry, right? Like
and
we like
as
to tell,
consumers, yeah.
right? We like to tell the story that Jews were in the factories and Jews were marching for labor organizing, but against Jewish factory owners, right? Like this was all in the family, right? There's Jews on sort of all sides of every part of history. Jewish gangsters, Jewish police officers, Jewish, labor organizers, Jewish factory owners. So I think that, this understanding that there's industry, right? And there is this sort of within our scriptural tradition, there's a lot of guidelines and a lot of framework for how you navigate industry. There was something very practical about the teachings of the rabbis in the Talmud and in, later interpretations of how we apply Jewish law, Jewish ritual law to the way that we negotiate in the marketplace. And I think some of that was a degree of practicality that was about survival, right? Like, what does Judaism value above all things? If you had to sort of name it, yes, food, but like before food, your life, staying alive, right? Judaism wants you to stay alive, physically alive. And the ability to navigate a marketplace and the ability to earn a living and support your family is a part of surviving. It's a part of thriving. And so I think there's a necessity to participating in the marketplace. And I think there's also a sort of a cultural resonance that we also thrive, right? The common labor organizing trope was bread and roses, right? So if we're surviving by participating in the modern American economy, North American
Mm-hmm.
economy, then we're going to thrive by being
Mm-hmm.
artistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
By participating in a way that also celebrates, what is sort of uniquely Jewish and uniquely culturally in a cultural inheritance, but also what is a part of the human experience of why we love both buying new things, but also why we love to sort of adorn ourselves and to,
Mm-hmm.
participate in that.
So I want to talk more about the gender aspects of this because I think it obviously all intersects. But so fast fashion, obviously, it has bad elements for labor and the environment, and also the quality of clothing itself. And overspending is bad for personal finance. There's no disagreements. That's just sort of how the world is. But I guess I also feel torn because I think there is a way that clothing as an interest, specifically clothing or shopping generally, gets denigrated precisely because it's associated with women, and especially because it's associated with Jewish women, with the so-called princess, right? And I think about this especially like in households, women tend to do the purchasing, right? Which can fall between kind of a guilty pleasure and a chore that you get kind of shamed for doing. So I guess the question is just, do you see there as being a way to be thoughtful about your own, not you personally, but one's own purchases that doesn't swing into that terrain? Because this is something I also struggle with, like to sort of a non-self-hating woman's critique of consumerism. How does one kind of arrive at that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important framing to keep in mind that if the economy was dirty work for Jewish men, then punching down from Jewish men was like denigrating Jewish women who were really the ones behind the scenes moving the economy through, right? We have all these memoirs of Jewish women from the medieval period. Gluckle of Hamelin is like a famous one where she was just in charge of she was completely running the business. And we happen to have a record of her, which is the miraculous thing, but we know there were many more like her that we don't have any records of. So knowing that behind the scenes, Jewish women have been running Jewish households, for millennia, I think is about highlighting that work and sort of equalizing it and saying that this is what it takes to run an American household. Whereas if I only buy for my house in North America and I'm not thinking collectively or I'm not thinking communally, then that company has the potential to earn, all the more profit from me because I need my own things and my neighbor, and I can't share with my neighbor, right? So we all are spending more because we're afraid to culturally ask our neighbors to share with us, or we're draining. In America, we are anyway. I don't know what's happening in Canada, but in America, we're literally draining public resources. So we have even less to share with one another, which will only embolden and sort of create more profit for private corporations to step in to fill that need. Oh, you now need this function that isn't being performed in a public space, you should have it in your own home. You should have your own swing set, right? Can you think of the inefficiency of having your own swing set in your own backyard that's your swing set only, that you don't share in a public way or really with anybody else?
If we had one, it would only be used by raccoons.
Raccoons.
Yeah, that's just a Toronto thing.
Ever since October 7th, 2023, Muslim and Jewish communities in Canada have been torn apart.
I've known you for 20 years. You've been at my house for Shabbat supper, I don't know how many times. And for 1 second, you can't put down your friend and just hold my hand?
We're fed a constant stream of Jews and Muslims talking at each other, about each other, but rarely do we hear them talking to each other.
There was, why are you doing this? What's the benefit of doing this?
This podcast aims to do something different. I'm Avi Feingold, a rabbi and a writer with the Canadian Jewish News.
I'm Yafa Sakeja, a Canadian-Palestinian entrepreneur and volunteer with the Canadian Friends of Standing Together.
We're sitting down with Jews and Muslims, Israelis and Palestinians from coast to coast and across the political divide, having difficult conversations in good faith.
We are not the Israeli government. Palestinians are not Hamas.
This is the place where we're both supposed to end up, Israeli and Palestinian, Arab and Jewish.
Subscribe to In Good Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts.
I guess maybe this is asking kind of the same question in a different way, but I mean, what you write it's a very personal story about your late mother, and I'm really sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
How her shopping is a love language, and how complicated that is, because I think this is something, and I don't think it's just Jewish families, although I think it may be more so in Jewish families or in different ways, whatever. I think that this is a real thing. But also, I guess I'm wondering, do you see anything positive in the Jewish female shopping tradition? And when I think about this, I'm thinking about things from life, but I'm also thinking of the TV show from a few years ago now, Broad City, where there's a scene where the Alana Glazer character is going knockoff handbag shopping with her mother under a manhole somewhere like around Canal Street in New York City. I can't describe this scene in a way that does it justice, but I'm also thinking of The Nanny, right? Which is like if Lomans were a TV show, kind of. Or even to some extent, something like Say Yes to the Dress has kind of that cultural vibe to it. So I guess I'm wondering, is there sort of a joyful element to this that can be honored in a way that doesn't necessarily involve buying anything or too much or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think a lot about how that act of being able to buy something beautiful that you want for your children or your grandchildren was miraculous to my mother and her mother, who grew up in the Depression, right, where people really struggled financially. They were working class of immigrant-born parents. And the idea that you could have enough to sustain yourself and then a little extra to buy yourself a doll or to buy yourself something beautiful and new for Rosh Hashanah was such a celebration. And I think that's the mindset that I would like to cultivate in myself and in my children. It isn't that I'm going to erase that language completely and that we don't extend our love to one another through things, because I think my mother thought things were miraculous. She also always said, love people, not things. This was just something she used to say. It's just a thing, right? And things were very important to her because they were hard fought, not easy to come by. And she tried to maintain that idea that at the end of the day, the things that really do matter are the people. And so I think that balance of we work so hard to have what we have, both as a people, to survive, to still be here, and to have achieved a certain level of economic prosperity that most of the Jewish community, not all, because there are still Jews who experience and live with poverty in both of our countries, right? There are Jews who live like that too, and we have to, as a community, sort of extend to that as well. But the idea that you could have worked so hard, made it to a certain point and celebrate something as beautiful and simple as a new dress for Rosh Hashanah. And I think it's because the other things come so easily and quickly like a fire hose towards us that we lose the ability to appreciate something that used to be quite singular and hard to come by. And because of the ease in which we live in our world, this is where I feel myself as a Jewish mother caught between a rock and a hard place. There is no more wall that exists as a natural boundary between the getting of things, right, and my children. I am that natural wall. I am that boundary between the getting of things. And my parents, when my kids look at me, they go, just make it come. Get your phone and get it here. That's so possible. And you're like, yes, it is totally possible. And I'm going to try to explain this to you in a way that doesn't give you a deep sense of economic insecurity, which is how I grew up and how my mother grew up, that we just couldn't afford it. What do you mean we can't afford it? Are we poor? No, we're not poor. Thank God we have enough. You do not need it. And to negotiate with an 8-year-old about what he does or doesn't need, is exhausting. And so sometimes we're like, okay, fine, click, here it comes. It's on its way. And sometimes we have to ourselves be that boundary of, you do not need it. I know you want it. It's not coming today.
Mm-hmm.
And hold that boundary because the world isn't going to hold it for them.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I have kids in elementary school myself, and I can relate to a lot of this, but I'm also thinking about how in Canada, in some ways, because we have, or at least until the tariffs screw things up in the States, but like we don't have American style online shopping to quite the same extent. Like there is online shopping, but it's maybe a little bit less like my kids are used to me saying like, yes, I have ordered something. I don't know when it's showing up. Like don't get your hopes up. But I was thinking though, like about just the whole concept of materialism, because I'm somebody who likes clothing a lot, very specific about clothing though. And I've always sort of resented the idea that to like clothing is to sort of like amass it in some kind of uncritical way. Because if anything, I feel like if you are very specific about stuff and if you care about the beautiful dress, I did an earlier episode of The Jewish Angle with the novelist Joanna Rakoff. We talked about these sort of Laura Ashley prairie type dresses that we both really very coincidentally enjoy getting from vintage shops. But anyway, if you're into the very specific stuff, maybe like materialism can almost like of a certain sort can kind of save you from overconsumption. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe I own too many of those. And I know I own too many of those dresses, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I think what I'm after is that feeling in your brain when you want something new, because our brains crave novelty. Some brains are more wired for wanting novelty than others, neurodivergence and all of that. And I'm wanting it, but I don't need it because I have enough. And then I'm starting to investigate, well, why shouldn't I trade with a friend? Or why shouldn't I wear the same thing? It's perfectly good. It still fits me. It doesn't have holes in it. And then I get into these social rules. And then I'm like, well, you know what? I have this position in my community where people look at me, what I'm wearing every Shabbat when I walk in, and everyone's giving me compliments about what I'm wearing. And that feels wonderful. And then I'm wondering if with my position, I can start to model, I'm going to be wearing less new things this year, or I'm going to be sharing. Or when someone says to me, oh my gosh, I love your dress, I'm going to say, oh, I borrowed it from so-and-so, and I'm a 40-year-old woman and I'm not at summer camp. Is that going to be, can I normalize that? Can we just have less things brought into the world because we don't have room for them in our own homes and we don't have room for them on our planet, and none of it is necessary. And if I can retrain myself to not immediately go for something new because I want it, what will I do with my brain in that moment? I don't know. Maybe you and I should talk next August.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question that's just like, do you have buy nothing, like that type of group where you live? Because swaps come to mind as kind of an answer to this. I mean, I also do think it's interesting, like these subtle cultural distinctions maybe between like mainline Philadelphia and Toronto? Because like is there much used clothing shopping where you are? Is that a big thing?
No, so the buy nothing is cutthroat and a little
Oh,
bit scary to me. So we do have a buy nothing group in my community, and I can't troll Facebook all day to like look for the things. Now, when I want to give, I give.
sure.
I think it's like micro communities. I think it's like,
But
you
like,
know,
do people buy used clothing? Is that like a big thing?
I think it is bigger in New York than it is
Mm.
in Philadelphia,
Hmm.
right? So like, and maybe, normalizing clothing swaps or normalizing that type of thing. But then you still, I don't know if this has been your experience, but in mine, you have a clothing swap and then there's still a pile of things that nobody wants and they go to the bin in front of the supermarket. And where does that bin go? I'm terrified to find out. Having worked in the developing world, you see the end of the line for some of these things. And it's um we will run out of room. We will, in our lifetime, probably. So someone, and preferably a lot of us, has to slow it down. And I think that part of, the legacy of Jewish working women in New York and, those who were in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911 and sort of the legacy of the fire, there was a foundation that was set up. What is the legacy of that? It's both to educate people about fast fashion globally and to slow that trade down so that people who are creating clothes that we need can earn a sustainable wage. And we also have to create less demand. Part of that flow of economics is that we have to want things less. And part of that is teaching our brains and continuing to talk about it. And I think the thing that we all find so exhausting is there are so many things to care about. Like this world is full of our cyclical vigilance of worrying about this or that or this thing. And this year, this was my turn. My mother died. I didn't see that coming. She had pretty advanced dementia, but she could have lived for another decade. It wasn't clear to me that this was going to be the time when she was going to die. And so for me, this is my year to reflect on this thing. And, John Green, who's an author and an activist around tuberculosis, he says that tuberculosis is going to be my thing. I'm going to fight and worry about tuberculosis. And you can kind of go about your day fighting and worrying for the things that you're going to fight and worrying about. And one of the things that I fight and worry about, as I know you do as well, is the Jewish people. And this year, I'm going to take on this thing of examining myself and using my small position of leadership in a Jewish community to encourage those around me to try it too. Let's buy less. Let's see what happens.
That's beautifully put. Thank you, Erin Beser, for coming on the Jewish Angle. Where can people find you and what would you like to promote?
People can find me. I have a few pieces on JTA, including the one that you're referencing. Where people can find me for me is on my Instagram account, which is called Hot Rebbetzin. I might need to explain that to people.
Oh, please explain it to me. I'm learning this now, and I had looked you up. I did not know that.
Okay, so I created an Instagram account called Hot Rebbetzin because rebbetzin is the traditional name for the wife of the rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Netflix show, as I'm sure you're an expert on Jewish culture, Nobody Wants This,
yes.
which is about a non-Jewish woman dating a rabbi, and she calls him with her friends Hot Rabbi. So he goes by Hot Rabbi in the show, played by Adam Brody. He is, in fact, a very hot rabbi. So I thought it would be funny to create an Instagram account that is Hot Rebbetzin, because Rebbetzin is the name for the wife of the rabbi. So do I think I am a hot Rebbetzin? No. I think hot Rebbetzin is an aesthetic. It's not my personal identity. It's like a mindset. It's like a vibe. It's something that anybody can do. Like hot Rebbetzin is like being nice to everyone at Kiddush, right? Like hot Rebbetzin is like hosting a Shabbat dinner where it's like 5 o'clock and everybody's like feral and like the adults are drinking wine before anybody's blessed anything.
Thank you so much for coming on, Erin Beser. This has been fantastic. Thank you for listening to The Jewish Angle, a podcast from the Canadian Jewish News. This has been Phoebe Maltz Bovy, opinion editor of the CJN and a contributing editor of Scribe Quarterly, the CJN's print magazine. The show is produced and edited by Michael Fraiman. Our music is by Frank Freeman. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to The Jewish Angle wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.